And we're back. This is episode 2, part B. So, my wife, who is camera shy, did not wish to take part in the interview process here. So, anyway, there we were, right? We land at Ben Gurion, van pulls up, old boy gets out, sunglasses. I swear I think he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Um, Duke. His call sign was Duke. And he was a State Department Diplomatic Security Service agent, and he would run our program for the first, God, several months. All right. Good guy, had been around a lot, and it was no secret that we were there to augment safe passage to and from Gaza for diplomatic missions. Our counterparts in Jerusalem would do the same thing for the West Bank and Jericho. And it's probably, I'd say it's a good, it's 40 minutes from Tel Aviv to the Gaza Strip, probably a good hour or so from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And yeah, so they would, unless there was need for crossover, for augmented security, the Jerusalem team would largely run operations in the West Bank and Jericho, and we would take the Gaza Strip. So Duke was our guy. Like, he would roll on missions with us. So we get there, and I swear it was like a Saturday. It was like a Saturday evening. And what was wild though was he's like, "Hey boys, all right, I'm Duke. Nice to meet you. This and this." He's like, "Come on, just get in the vehicle." So we get in the vehicle. We go straight through passport control. Boom, boom, boom. Like right through the diplomatic line. We get stamped and processed, and off we go. Our housing wasn't ready yet. They had apartments for us, but they weren't ready. So he's like, "Well, we got you rooms at the Israel right across the street from the embassy, and the embassy is on the water. It's on the beach. It is beautiful. So there's a street in front and a street behind, but right across the street there's like a beautiful brick promenade that just goes like from one end to the other, and just shops and little beach bars like right down on the sand. It's just pretty wild. All right, looks like somebody's down in the weight room, so might hear a few crashes and grunts of look at me, how hard I work. But it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, what can you do? When you can, it is what it is, right? Anyway, so we get there, we do a quick drop the bags off in the hotel. So now, because of the way they're dealt, Cheese and I end up in the same room at the hotel. All right. So we got like 5 minutes, man. Drop your bags, freshen up, and meet downstairs because we're gonna have a dinner. Get to know Duke, and talk about the next coming days. So we get into our room, and like I said, John was tall. Um, oh, it's behind me, for God's sake. So yeah, he's the one in the blue shirt on the far left.
Far left.
So you could see he's like almost a head taller than me, right? So we get into the room, and he was just a good guy, man, a good guy. He, walks down the hall. There's like a nice, there's like the kitchen area here, nice sitting area here, hallway, bathroom, bedroom. He looks in the bedroom, comes back out into the hallway. He goes, "Hey brother, I'll flip you for the bed." And obviously there's one bed, and I took one look at him, and I'm like, "John, take the bed, man." I'm like, "Look at me. I'll fit perfectly on the couch. Like, I'm not tall. But I thought it was really like humble and very nice of, "Hey, I'll flip you." I'm like, "Flip me?" I'm like, "Dude, I, I'll be comfortable here. You won't. So I was like, "All right. So we put our stuff, downstairs. We go right across the street, directly next to the embassy. There was another hotel, and next to that there was a little corner cafe called Mario's. And by coincidence, the owner's name was Mario. So we get there, nice guy, really nice guy, and he's made these beautiful handmade pizzas, and like we're sitting in this like private dining room, which when you see the place and after we got familiar with it, there are just sometimes you just want to come out swinging like a madman. Yeah, look at me, look
Is
at
that our
me.
friend?
It is.
Ah,
Anyway, um, yeah. So fantastic dinner, and Duke has given us a brief, a lay of the land. And what was very, very interesting too, and not, I know we're having fun, with this and mm, Spetzel down there, but what was really wild was, Duke is briefing us, and he was like, guys, he said, not too long ago, none of this was necessary. He said when Foreign Service officers, USAID personnel, when they had business to conduct in Gaza, they'd self-drive. They'd sign a vehicle out from the embassy pool. They would drive down, conduct their business. He said, I guess, and I don't recall how many years he had been there, but they do rotations like any other government agent. And he said, when I first got here, he's like, they used to have like Fourth of July celebration for the embassy. Have it at a beach hotel down in Gaza to again, the diplomacy being key. It's like, you live up here, the embassy is up here, but you're fostering diplomacy. So it was all good. Um, but those days were over. Now all of a sudden, at the drop of a hat, you could go down, and it was you could set your clock by it. If there had been something in the news where, let's say, President Bush came out in support of an Israeli position, we'd be driving through on a mission, and people would like throw stuff at us. And conversely, you have a situation where maybe the White House's stand was in opposition of an Israeli policy. We drive through the same marketplace, a week, 2 weeks later or whatever, and people are cheering and waving at us. So you realize that the volatility of it hinges like on any number of things. But that was the need for the enhanced security for the U.S. Foreign Service personnel. So we get there, we get a briefing, we have a great dinner, and the plan is the next day we're going to go into the embassy, we're going to draw all of our gear, and we have a mission on Monday. And again, getting back to, okay, well, there's skills you're supposed to have, and I think every one of us in our own way was kind of like, okay, we get these weapons. There's no range. We're not gonna fire these weapons before. Now, they've been fired. They're in the inventory. There's not like we picked them up off the street. But the difference between a BZO, like, hey, these weapons have been BZO'd. That's good. It keep you in the ballpark. But I never ever did anything with any firearm for work purposes that I didn't take to the range and fire myself. I mean, I've never. So I think every one of us was kind of like, okay, but ultimately, you play the hand you're dealt and you support the mission, So nobody said a word, nobody complained about it. But again, like, kudos to Jim. Jen criticizes me for this. Every so often, well, I talk with my hands all the time. On this camera, when you make a motion that looks like a thumbs up, a little cartoon bubble of a thumb shows up on the screen. I didn't know if that, duh, right? Well, it's in the recording too. So, and I'm not doing this. But if you throw 2 thumbs up, you get a burst of fireworks. So maybe we'll do that at the end of the episode. Okay. Or when I pull a fucking Wile E. Coyote and drop an anvil on this motherfucker. Maybe. Wait a minute, man. The coyote never wins, does he? So that, never mind. As you were. That'll go sideways real quick, No. So anyway.
So
yeah.
You said BZO?
Battle zero, like a basic zero,
Basic
like the
zero,
weapon's
okay.
been zeroed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, like for the most part, we didn't pick them up off the streets. We didn't, buy them from some guy out of his trunk. So we had no reason to think that they wouldn't function properly or fire properly, or that they wouldn't be zeroed to they should have been good enough for any purpose. But we didn't fire them, right? And absolutely nothing we can do about that, because there's no range. This wasn't like in like one of the James Bond movies where there's like a tunnel under the embassy where we go, oh, right, and then like there's your, but that would have been kind of cool if you did have some type of, even like a short range, that you could have just test fired, but we didn't. So neither had we driven the vehicles. And these things that you learn, right? Level 4 armored Suburbans. And I remember this because each one of us, because it was a small team, everyone had collateral duties. So, for example, when the two teams of four formed up, uh, John Cheese and I were on opposite teams, right? So the breakdown of the teams there was it was Jim as our team leader, Mark Parsons, a dear friend of mine, and Mike and myself. We were Bravo team. And then Alpha team was Swervin, Cheese, Kurt, and an empty space because Mike didn't make the trip. So now we're waiting on his replacement. They're going to expedite the process, so forth, so forth. But until they did, we were one man down. So, we draw our gear. The vehicles were level 4 armored vehicles, Suburbans. But one of the things that we found out, and Cheese, one of his tasks, he was the training counterpart on Alpha Team, but he was also in charge of the vehicles. That was one of his, I'm pretty sure, one of his collateral duties. I mean, he had driven armor before, as a member of Dev Group. Actually, both of those units do a good bit of like very high risk, close, like PSD, protective services. If you remember, like the beginning of Afghanistan, before, I'm not going to go down a political rabbit hole, but before our allies were capable of protecting themselves, Delta and Dev Group would be on opposite rotations. So you would have TF Green would be Delta, TF Blue would be Dev Group. And in addition to a lot of their other missions, one of the things they would do is they would assign a protective team to Karzai. And in fact, this is kind of interesting. When we were still at Crucible, boom, like midday makes the news. There's an attempt on Karzai's life, and his security detail puts down the threat, and so forth and so forth. And sure enough, those were, and I couldn't tell you at the time if it was green or blue. I don't recall who was there. But, as we're getting ready to go to Israel, like, this is another reminder, like, shit's happening. That's like happening real time. But that was a big deal. And somewhere in the archives, it comes up every once in a while in my Facebook feed, there's a really cool picture of Jim in Beirut, Lebanon, with the U.S. ambassador, on a protective detail. And just so, like I said, I mean, to me, to be able to have learned from some guys like that, and there's no school for that. There's really not. So that's like, hey, right on, But again, the personalities, like here's Jim and he's just like, what in the world did they send me, right? But you would have never known it because he maintained his poise and his bearing. And so we go on our first mission. And again, I mean, just bad luck, but Mike draws. And the way we ran was you'd have an American driver, an embassy driver in the first Suburban. Duke, he was our State Department. We were his guys. So he was in the right front seat. Okay. The package, the USAID or Foreign Service Officer would be in the back seat of the lead vehicle. And then we were the QRF, the quick response force, the maneuver element, whatever you want to call it. So while Duke, the State Department agent, would have control of the package, Jim had tactical control of the whole package of the mission. And he would ride right front in the Suburban, and the three of us would do a rotation week to week. Mike started off as the driver, and I guess he had said that he had driven before, so more than Mark and I. We did some motorcade operations, and this was something too. The company that I'd worked for previously, we did a lot of schools, which was great. From SUVs, Suburbans, Lincoln Town Cars. Like the Town Car was, I guess, like a standard, And I remember going through a really good driving school in Virginia, and it's you can't put a price tag on it. It was awesome, but we never drove armor. The dynamic's different. And like I said, just with the rifle, I could zero a rifle, hand it to you, it'll probably work. It'll probably work, but you should really zero it yourself. The smart person, the prudent person would zero it themselves. So similarly, I'm like, no, I understand how to do these evasive maneuvers. I remember every skill, every tactical maneuver, pitting, J-turns, reverse outs, ramming, you name it. The dynamic is different in an armored vehicle. It just is. Also, and this is things that you see in the movies and then how they translate to real life, right? And it's, to me, they're nuances, but they're things that I'm glad I know. Oh, if the road's blocked and you have to ram, right? I mean, what makes sense? Am I going to hit that car in the front where the engine is and where it's heaviest? Or am I going to hit it in the tail where it's lightest and move it out of the way? Well, I'm going to hit the tail. But guess what I have? I have airbags, right? So the prudent person in that type of situation would have disconnected the airbags, and essential personnel are wearing their seatbelts. So if you're going to ram, you're going to give it a good push. Also, if situation time permits, maybe don't hit it with the front of your vehicle. Right. But again, things that look good on TV and things that how they translate. But here we are, like 24 hours, 48 hours after not even. We hit the ground Saturday night. We're rolling Monday morning, so we had Sunday to get our gear, do a quick, hey, here's a map. We don't know where we're going. And one of the things too, and this is not funny, and this is no kidding. At the time, the Palestinian Authority was in charge of the Gaza Strip. All right. It was like the governing body. They had their policing paramilitary arm, and I'll never forget this. State Department agents that briefed us before we rolled. One of them, Eric, just again, the best. These guys are the best. I remember him telling us, he was like, okay, he goes, when you see them, you'll know. And he was like, they're going to meet us at the crossing, and we'll follow them from point to point for the meetings of the day. So again, like red flag number whatever at this point, we're like, all right, don't know these people, right? They're supposed to be our counterparts in Palestine. Don't know them. Hamas was already active, all right? They were more like a movement at the time, but they were gaining momentum. And this was back in 2002. It's how long ago. But one of the things we found really odd was, all right, and again, I mean, I guess you go back to like ancient warfare, right? Oh, these are our counterparts. They're from, another clan, but they're going to lead us through How do you know? How do you know until you know that this guy's not going to turn around and bite you in the ass? Well, a year and a half later, they did, because anyway, we'll get there. But so, here we go, and we're like, we've got weapons that haven't been fired. We're meeting an element that's supposed to be our allies, and they're going to lead us because the night before, it's SOP, the night before, the State Department would send them our itinerary for the next day. Oh, we're going to meet you at this time at the crossing, at the Erez crossing where you would process through. Subsequently, we had several of us brought this up more than once. Can we not enter from any of the other crossings from north to south? Why don't we just, and I get that the PA has to be involved. Tell them we'll meet them on target. We'll meet them at the first venue. At least let us get there. No, you can't do that. With diplomatic relations. I'm like, okay, all right. So again, kind of put that off to the side, but for right now, for the minimum, weapons we haven't fired. Like, for all I know, I'm going to pull the trigger and one of those little flags that says bang is going to come out the barrel, right? So, okay. But I will say this, though. The personnel that we rolled with, couldn't have asked for more. Duke knew his job. He knew his business, and we were glad to have him there with us. And I think he was glad to have us there as, augmenting the security process. And again, Jim knew his stuff. No doubt in cheese. I couldn't have asked for more. Mark, we didn't know each other. We're all total strangers, to this point. But Mark and Mike's driving. There we go. Mark and I are in the back, and we're, watching left, right. And really, it was so crazy. Like, you'd sit sideways. So you're looking out, left and right and watching for anything unusual. But there was nothing covert about this. Right. We're in clearly marked, was it CD? Charlie Delta, I think, was the prefix. Pretty sure that was it, but the license plates were alphanumeric, and they're just like long rectangular white with black trim and black alphanumerics. CD, I'm pretty sure it was the identifier for the U.S. Embassy, and then the number, for the vehicle, diplomatic plates and all that, which is super duper. anywhere else, right? But one, you kind of identify yourself. Two, they're not black Suburbans because it's the Middle East and it can be hot, but they're like a silverish gold kind of, less heat reflective. One of the things Cheese pointed out real fast was he was like, guys, these are level 4 armor. I said that several times before, and the point I'm getting to is they're heavy. There was nothing done with the hinges on the doors, right? They're standard factory hinges, so the additional armor didn't take into account, like, you got junior varsity hinges and you got a varsity weight capacity, right, in the door itself, and the brake pads. So the brakes and the brake pads, right? So now you're trying to stop a heavy vehicle. Now for us in Tel Aviv, really didn't matter. It's relatively flat and level, 40 minutes of interstate driving. And I remember Eric briefed us up on the Palestinian Authority. He goes, oh, you'll recognize them. He's like, sometimes, guys, they can look like the Keystone Cops. And he was like, other times, they're sharp, And he said, but you'll recognize them because they wear, what the hell did he call it? Snake Plissken camo from Escape from New York, right? He goes, Snake Plissken, just remember that. He goes, and when you get there, when you drive in, he's like, you remember the movie The Omega Man with Charlton Heston? It was it was based on I Am Legend, right? Honest to goodness. He's like, when you first get there, he's like, you're going to be driving through and you're like, oh my God, like, look at this. And, you find different reasons for this. I guess there is something in like by Palestinian law, you don't pay taxes on a building if it's still under construction. So typically what would happen in these new construction sites, they wouldn't finish them. So you'd still have like exposed rebar and concrete block and all this. And it's like, but it was odd. It was just kind of odd. Sometimes the streets are channelized and but I do know this, and this is a fact. I've been on trips where checks, money was given for infrastructure, for 7-Up. Oh, yeah, today's meeting, we're going to meet at the villa of the president or the owner of the 7-Up bottling company, and USAID is presenting a check for like $100 million or something astronomical. And I'm like, roger that. So this should benefit the people, right? And you get $100 million for your infrastructure and you're going to start bottling like a son of a bitch, It didn't go there. Yeah. Right? So you see that this is part of a process that you're like, are we doing anything here? And I say that, then I step back and I say, you know what, for a long time I did believe, we're keeping the people who are doing these missions, we're keeping them safe, right? To the best of our ability, we're keeping them safe. So first day, we roll on our mission, we get our objective, we do our thing, we're coming back out, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but we get word, hey, pick up the pace, get out. Anytime there was any type of activity, whether it was Palestinian on Israeli, Israeli on Palestinian, anything like that, first thing that would happen very, very quickly was the borders would be shut down and secured. If it had been a type of retaliatory strike, because oftentimes there'd be mortar and rocket attacks from Palestine into southern parts of Israel, Ashkelon, Ashdod. You don't want to be caught on the wrong side as a Westerner when that happens. So like, okay, expedite, boom, here we go. And again, heavy vehicles, not used to the weight ratio and the braking capacity and all that. Sure enough, boom, we hit the lead vehicle, right? And I don't remember how far we got. I remember the impact. I remember hitting. It wasn't bad. It was just like, oh, we're not gonna make it. Dang, right? And of course, Jim's just like, stoic, but it's all right, great. So one thing and another, we get the vehicle to a point. I think we just cross-loaded into the other vehicle and off we went. And then sure enough, we had enough liaison personnel in the embassy to, hey, we're going to call a tow company. They're going to go down, bring the vehicle back to Tel Aviv. We'll use another one in the short term. But I do remember this, and these are like the highlights. I keep waiting to hear, oh, my foot. But anyhow, one of the first things, like maybe as I recall, maybe even that night, we had a really nice. Well, for quite a while we were still in the hotel. I don't know how long, a week maybe. We get our apartment. Alpha Team still didn't have. I think we got ours a little bit earlier. Ours was ready. Theirs wasn't. So we had a really nice open floor plan, kind of like a loft, and then a rooftop. It was only a 4-story building, so we had half of the top floor. The gentleman and his family who lived the other half owned a market on the ground floor. It was so cool. It was one of those like roll-up doors from side to side, top to bottom, and year round the door was like rolled up. And I remember the gentleman that lived right below us was an older gentleman, and every evening, like this to me was all part of the upside of it. The gentleman that lived below us, every evening you'd see him in the store, sitting at the counter playing chess with the owner. And I mean, they got to know us and, short order. And I'll tell you, like, we were always welcomed and treated like neighbors to the nth degree, to the best. When our guys were killed, I never experienced anything like it. I mean, you realize, like, we've gotten to know each other in a short period of time. We've become very, very close. And again, everyone was neighborly. Everyone was cordial. When our guys were killed, it took on almost like a family level. Like, it was wild. It was surreal. And I think too, maybe a part of it was, and I'm getting way ahead. But it was nice, right? So here we are back at close to the beginning, and Jim's like, all right, guys. He's like, everybody up on the roof. We have a team meeting. We're like, oh man, we're fired already, So we get up there. He's got a cooler full of Corona beer, and we're sitting there and we're cracking beers. And he's like, all right, I want to go around the table. Everybody introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves. So we get, boom, boom, boom. We get all around the table. It's all good stuff. And Jim's like, right. He goes, well, I'll be honest with you. He was like, I was kind of surprised with what they sent us. All right. He said, I expected more. Specifically, I expected more special operations personnel. And he's like, and I'll never forget this to this day, and I've used this more and more. He's like, but you go to war with what you got. And he was like, so first order of business. He's like, Rocky, find us. And the thumbs up again. I love that little guy. I think if you could control that, like I'd put little eyes on him, thumbs up pops up. He's got a face. He's like, but he's like, Rocky, you're the team training officer. He's like, find us a range. Find us a range, like, right away. He's like, Mark was his primary collateral. He was medical. And he's like, I want you to come up with a couple periods of instruction for emergency medical aid, right? He's like, Mike, you're driving the first week. He's like, come up with a good presentation on defensive driving. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, like, you would come up with it, you would present it, boom. So early on, like I said, it was early on. Cheese is the trainer, the training officer for Alpha Team. So I get online and we find a shooting range, which is not too far north of the embassy. And now in Israel, it's like Friday and Saturday are the weekends, right? So we decide, we're like, well, hey, if we get up early enough and get up there on Friday morning, we'll hit the range early. You and I will go advance it, check it out, meet with management, see, how easily it would be for us to train there. Great. So we get there, and it's really not that, there's not a lot of people there. It was a beautiful facility. I mean, they had pictures up all over the place of the Israeli Olympic team for like, what's the event called? Like when
Biathlon?
Yes. Yeah. So they had photographs of that. They had photographs of like their rifle team and that kind of thing. Very, very cool. And it was a nice facility. You had like indoor ranges, you had outdoor. It's like super. So we get there, and sure enough, as we're standing there waiting to meet with management, one of the guards from the U.S. Embassy had his Israeli guard force, right? So one of the guards comes walking by, and he's like, hey, guys. And we're like, hey, buddy, what's up, And he's like, well, my IPSC team is practicing here. And we're like, oh, okay, great. So what are you doing here? Oh, well, we want to meet with someone to see if we could use the place to train. He's like, oh yeah, come with me. So, the person we talked to, they're not sure who to direct. Well, it wasn't like that, but our guy knew exactly who could hook us up. So he takes us in, introduces us. Hey, these are guys from the embassy, yada, yada. Super. So then he says, hey, he goes, come on out and meet some of the guys. So we go out to the range and we're talking with some of the other, shooters and all that. And what I found really, really interesting too was when we got there, none of us spoke Hebrew. So we thought, hey, this is a great opportunity. Like we'll learn the language, right? What we found was when we would mingle with like younger people, they all wanted to speak English. So like nobody, we didn't learn, and God bless him, man. John had this, I don't know if it was, he didn't have a Texas accent at all. Like he's, undetectable, non-issue. But when he would try to speak Hebrew, oh my God, I love him. I love him. I miss him every day. But he'd ask for a check, and you're like, dude, I'm not even sure what you said, but it sounded so awkward, like you were gagging. That's been a minute. Hashbon, check, hashbon, right? Bevakasha, hashbon, bevakasha, check please. Hashbon, bevakasha. Like, what? Like, I'm not even sure that means anything, let alone what you think it means, but he was just a good dude. But so anyway, we get there, right? And the president of their club, he didn't speak English, so our guy from the embassy is translating for us. And he's like, hey, nice to meet you, this and this. And he's like, hey, well, do you want to shoot with us? And both of us were like, you never pass up an opportunity to shoot, but we're like, well, we didn't bring anything. Like, we're not, and that was kind of odd too. We typically did not carry off duty. We were credentialed to do so. Like we had our little permits or what have you. But as a rule, we didn't. So, okay, great. So we didn't bring anything. Oh, don't worry about that. He's like, everybody here has extra gear. Yeah. Great. So someone gives John a Glock with a holster and mag pouches. I get this tricked out. And these are spare weapons, granted. So whoever I got, like my benefactor, like this is a spare. This is a custom 1911 in 40 caliber. The custom everything, right? I have a holster for it, but I've got no mag pouch for the mags. So I take the spare magazines and I tuck them in my belt, right? So, okay, here we go. We're downrange. We're listening to the briefing. I don't even remember the courses of fire off the top, but IPSC is kind of cool if you've ever seen it. I don't even remember what IPSC stands for. International Pistol Shooters Club. Anyway, IPSC. And it's courses of fire. So they'll bring in like doors on rolling casters, and it's like, okay, you open the door and you step through and then you engage, right? Or, knock down steel targets or, poppers or any number of different scenarios. But what's very, very cool is it's super organized. The course of fire is already laid out. So you come up as the next shooter. The line range master will be like, okay, on this course of fire, you will boom, boom, boom. Okay, great. So at one point, and it just goes to show you, right? Unfamiliar gear. Never fired it before. I don't even, like the tolerances of this thing, I don't even know it yet, right? It's chambered in 40 caliber. Those rounds are not light, okay? And it's all customized and all this. So at the buzzer, you will draw your weapon and you'll engage these steel plates, right? Knock them down. Super. So here I am. I'm ready, right? I draw the pistol. As I'm coming up out of the holster, I bring my hands together. I just tap the magazine release. Yeah. Magazine falls out, and it's like bright. I wouldn't say chrome, but like bright stainless. Yeah. So as it falls, I can feel it because it's like, it's heavy. So I feel it, but I also see this like flash of like silver. I've got a round in the chamber, right? So as I'm coming on target, the magazine drops. I go, bam, I'm on the I'm on the spare mag, boom, 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 right? So ting, 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 ting. I'm like, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, like that's embarrassing, right? So I hit the targets, safe, holster, lines clear. I pick up the mag, you know, range ferry my gear, right? So we turn around to come back. Now, like, I'm going to top off my magazine, and we've still, like, they're hospitable, gracious, but we're still feeling like, dude, we're the outsiders, you know? So we're like, "Oh," you know? So I said to Cheese, like, as I'm loading, I go, man, how bad was that? Like, I'm not looking at him. I'm like, how bad was that? And he's, you know, he's messing with his gear. He goes, dude, nice. He goes, you hit everything you aimed at and you got back in battery really fast. He's like, good job. I'm like, yeah, you too. So he's, you know, again, he's just ting, ting, ting. He's killing it. And we're having fun. You know, a couple of the other things were like, okay, you know, you at the buzzer, you're facing uprange. At the buzzer, you turn, you move down. There's a table. Your weapon's unloaded. So you pick it up, load it, and then engage through the door, through the window, whatever the scenarios. So we shot for a good while. You know, we shot for a good while with them. So the next thing I know, they invite us for refreshments, like right in the next little room. They had set up like coffee and, you know, cookies or whatever. So we go over, we're making small talk and this and this. And somewhere, I still have this. I've got to dig it out at some point. I haven't seen it in 20 years. So the president of the club comes over with our guy from the embassy, and he says something to him in Hebrew, and then he says, repeats to us, he goes, hey, he'd like to know if you'd like to join our team. And I'm like, I look at Cheese, and I'm like, dude, right? And Cheese is like, yeah, you know, so we're like, yeah. So they come out with these polo shirts, you know, the Tel Aviv chapter, you know, the IPSC crest and all that. I was like, man, this is so cool. We made the team, you know. And so we went back. I couldn't wait to tell Jim. I was like, hey, not only did we find the range, it's awesome. It's good for everything we need. And they invited me and they invited us to shoot with them. We shot with them, and we're on the team. And he's just smiling. He's like, all right, all right. But I think to the point. So we didn't work together before. We didn't go through the same schools before. So Jim made it a point, a priority, that we're going to go get these weapons tight, and we're going to work small unit tactics. And we used that facility so many times. Like, we would go up with both teams together, and we'd bring our vehicles into, like, there was an interior outdoor range. So it was outdoor, but you'd be inside the compound. Okay. Right? And I mean, we would stage the vehicles like, you know, vehicular ambush, or, you know, lead vehicles down, you know, position the follow vehicle in support, move out, you know, engage targets downrange. And so we took what we had and we made the absolute best of it. And the training that we didn't have together, we got it. We took it upon ourselves to make sure, you know, Jim took it upon himself to make sure that we had that training. And driver training. I mean, he identified an amusement park that was closed for the season, and this guy would do all kind of route reconnaissance on his own, and, you know, Google searches and all this. And he was like, all right, guys, he said, you know, we're going to sign out some vehicles tomorrow. We're going to do some driver training. And sure enough, you know, we take the armored vehicles, we go down to this amusement park, and we're in this, like, the roadway that leads up to it, and then the traffic circles around it. And just, you know, I mean, anything that we were lacking, he made sure that in short order, we built up those skill sets. Yep. And I thought that made us, we even were able to, they had some armored vehicles that were set to be scrapped. So they told us where they were, they allowed us to have them, and we did breaching exercises on them, which was incredible. I mean, you know, manual breaching tools that we carried, sledgehammer, Halligan bar, it was just great. I mean, you know, the vehicle's down and you've got, you know, Americans in it, you can't get them out. So what do? You know, identify the weaknesses, work the hinges with wedge and sledgehammer, work the weak points in the windows with the sledge and the Halligan. And, you know, we learned that really fast. And again, you know, you've got the talent and the skills. Like Cheese had worked as a breacher before, and, you know, was schooling us up on the use of the manual tools and everything. And, you know, such was my mindset at 38. I was like, yeah, man, I'll be the breacher. You know, I love this, you know, so carry a sledge and, you know, just go to work. But like I said, you know, you realize the magnitude of the situation, and you realize the training available, and maybe you strike that perfect balance where you're like, hey, what'd you do today? Oh, are you kidding me, man? We breached armored vehicles. Like, that's what we did today. But it's all a very small piece, and, you know, hopefully a skill set that you don't ever use. But, you know, and I think conversely too, and I will say this, I'm going to wear mittens from now on when we do this, because every time I move, that little bastard pops up. But so we start to, we're getting a lot more range time. And I'm like, all right. So a couple of us are running red dot optics on our rifles. So the next thing, we buy them. We don't mount them. We get them to the range. The next available opportunity, boom, throw them on, and now use zero. So one of the guys on the team, wasn't Jim or Mark or Cheese or Kurt or Vic. Vic was the replacement that they sent in for Mike. Really good dude. Really LA County Sheriff. And the guy had some situational awareness. Like you could tell he wasn't like a public affairs officer. Like he didn't sit at a desk. I mean, he brought that, definitely brought that with him. But did a lot of good range time. So, we get there, we zero our red dots. Great. So now the one guy that didn't want one, now he decides he wants one. But he says to me in passing, when we're back at the house, "Hey, Rocky, just make a list and order me one of everything that you got." And I'm like, when monkeys fly out of my butt, all right, order me one of everything you've got. Do you even know what I have? Or is it Gucci that, like, you see shit that's on my rifle that you think looks sexy and you want that? I'm like, dude, this is an amateur hour, And I mean, like, yeah, a lot of us did not come from Spec Ops backgrounds or Tier 1 units, but you know what? You're right here, you're right now, and you're fortunate enough to be working with guys who did. So, you want to put something on your rifle, find out what it is, how it works, use it, get good at it, because to me, that strongly suggests that you are going to be that guy that's going to put it together, have no idea how it works, I mean, and the one thing I will say about red dots, you zero it properly, these things will hit whatever they aim at. Whatever it's on, that's what's going to get hit. I've had the lens on more than one red dot shattered, and there's still enough of it to project that dot. The dot still works. So, but I wouldn't just slap it on and hope for the best, But anyway, yeah, he's wasn't with the team much longer either. But as it turned out, we ran some good missions, ran some really good missions, and I don't know, you sometimes you reach a point where, personnel changes, right? So Jim had an opportunity to move on to Iraq. And I don't remember what time of year. It was summertime, I recall. And so he had already made his selection. Mark was his second in command. So Jim was Bravo 1, Mark was Bravo 2, I was Bravo 3, and Mike was Bravo 4. So as it would turn out, Mark would slide into Jim's spot. And Jim ended up taking another position in Iraq. So we're like, okay, super. I mean, he was missed, but I think I believe this with all my heart. I think he left with the confidence that he was leaving the team in good hands, because Mark was an absolute professional. And I think that's one thing, too, that I always appreciated. Mark had no military background at all. Okay. And didn't matter a bit. Because I think because of that, I think he drove himself harder than anybody else to make sure that he was absolutely on point all the time. And, Jim couldn't have picked a better number 2. Could not. I mean, this guy was all over it. And so, Jim leaves. We had another replacement come in. I want to say he was LAPD. And he wasn't a bad guy. He really wasn't. But I really don't think he had like the big picture. I don't believe he had the big picture. And at the time, oh my God, this was crazy. I forgot about this. Swerven kind of self-destructed. He kind of self-destructed because, just like with Mike back in there, oh, something's wrong, and school me up on the M4. In the first week, it didn't really happen early on when we were in the hotels. I think that gave enough separation after hours that didn't happen. But once they moved into their team house, within the first week that they were in their team house, every member of that team came to Jim, because Jim was basically Jim was Bravo 1, Swerven was Alpha 1, but Jim was in charge of both teams, right? Every member of that team came to Jim separately, and they were like, Jim, do any of your guys want to move to Alpha Team? I can't stay there anymore. And Jim was like, and I just saw him last fall. He came up to visit. He was like, we know. Right? I mean, so Jim was like, Christ! He was like, this. No thumbs. Jim was like, Christ, he's like, everybody's asking me to come to our team. He's like, and I'm telling them, if you can find one of my guys that's willing to go own your place, then yes, nobody's going to leave. And we didn't. But that was just indicative that that their team leader was on a bit of a power trip, you know.
Okay.
And I do remember this. So, you know, Jim calls a joint team meeting. And he's like, here's what we're going to do. You know, and I don't recall any hostilities between the teams per se. Kurt's a good guy. Haven't seen him in a while, but he's a good guy. Vic had no issues with. Hard dude, but you know, a good operator. Cheese was the best. Wouldn't have any animosity between us. I think what was happening was, you know, again, a poisoned team leader poisons the team. Then that creates tensions that spill over to both teams, right? So I remember Jim calling this meeting. We're in, you know, we had an office that there wasn't a lot of room for us in the embassy. So we had our gear locker down in the basement with all of our secure comms and all of our kit. But we had an office across the street by the little thoroughfare of the Israel where we'd stay. So we meet, and Jim's like, right. He's like, I have nothing to say. He's like, I don't. He said, so here's how this is going to go. These are the rules of engagement for this meeting. He was like, I will be the monitor. And he was like, you will each have your turn to speak. You will not speak when someone else is talking. You won't. If you want to have you want to comment on something, you wait. And then when that person's done, we'll go around the room one at a time so everybody gets a chance to retort or not. And he's like, but you will not interrupt. And he said, when I say stop, you stop. He's like, there won't be arguments. And if you do, he's like, when I say stop, you will stop. Roger that. So here we go. It gets to the other team leader. And he comes off with this fucking pompous, and he really was. He had just this body language. Like sometimes in my less mature days, I would have said he just has a punchable face, you know. But it is very pompous kind of bearing. He's like, well, I have to tell you, I'm just used to working with all special operations personnel, and when I got here, I have to say, this was by way of explanation, like, you know, I might have seemed to be a dick, but here's why, because you don't all come from a special operations background, and I'm used to working with all special operations personnel. It's exactly how he said it.
So he was a former special operations?
No! And he didn't, here's the thing. He was not. He didn't say he was. It wasn't like fraudulent or anything like that. He did. I want to say Marine Corps counterintelligence, and not Marine Corps Raider, not MARSOC. You know, he was like Marine Corps counterintel. And I knew a couple of those guys over the years. One of them was a good dude, and I only knew 3, including him. The other 2 I thought were just full of themselves, extremely full of themselves. And then I wonder if you struck upon that little niche that's kind of like, you know what? We're kind of cool. We're not spec ops, but we're spec ops adjacent, you know? At least that was my take on it. And like I said, one of them was a solid dude. I worked with him before 9/11 and for the same company I was with on 9/11. And he's, you know, to this day I see him on Facebook. I mean, he's a good guy, you know. The other 2, I'm like, you know, a little full of yourself there, aren't you? And here's my measuring stick, right? I hope that hurt. I hope you hyperextended your xiphoid process or something. You never know that I failed out of medical school. Right? And I'm not sure you can hyperextend a xiphoid process. I know you can damage it. And anyway, my experience has been this, and this is tried and true, and I'll defend it to anybody. I've been able to work with very, very large number of spec ops personnel. On both any branch, a lot of tier one personalities. My experience has been anybody needs help, these guys are there to help. There's no criticism. There's no, there's none of that. There's, hey man, right, we're going to get it up to speed. We're going to work towards the goal, right? Then there's that other kind that's like this guy I'm talking about, and that brand, I guess you could say, where it's like, yeah, man, like we did something different, and like it's cool. It's cool. Be proud of what you did. Be proud of what you did. But this mission right here today, let's follow these mission parameters, and those of us who did all moved on to something bigger and better. All right. I mean, I thought that. But what was crazy was, so he gets done with his piece, and it gets to me, and I said, "Yeah, I've got something to say." I'm like, "Dave, I hear you loud and clear." And I'm like, "So you addressed the fact that you're used to working with special operations personnel, and you're wondering why some of us are here." And I'm like, "But you're not special operations. You're not from any of those communities." "Well, yeah, I know, but," I'm like, "No. But that's a big gap, So I guess any one of us could turn that same phrase, right? Hey, I've worked a lot of jobs with guys who had been special operations from all over the world, the UK, Australia, the US, all branches. But you're not any more than I was or him. So when we just all focus on the mission, move forward. "Well, no, I get you." And I'm like, I fucking hope you get me. I'm speaking English and I'm speaking clearly. I'm not really sure how else to say it, but but I think what was wild was and it didn't get ugly. I mean, I made my point, he, point, counterpoint. I'm like, I'm not, and all I wanted to get across was, I'm like, what the hell did you just say? Like, that makes really no sense, but kudos. Okay. So it's done. And I think, I'm not sure what the takeaway was. I believe, Jim wanted to give it the opportunity to get it all out there, to clear the air, so to speak. Well, shortly after that, we had a visit from, DynCorp sent like some dude. And at that point, and it wasn't because of that. It was a scheduled program. And it was like, well, how's it going? How's everything going? And sure enough, everyone... Well, let me put it to you this way. My position in the roster to go see him, a few guys had already saw him. So I get in, and I'm like, yeah, he's like, how's the housing? Oh, housing's great. How's the climate? Hey, climate's great. How's this? Oh, it's great. How's everything with that guy? And I'm like, oh. Now, I wouldn't have not, how's everything with the team? How's everything with the inter-team, You can't not, shame on you if you don't say something, because it was a big enough issue by then. But I didn't even get that opportunity. By the time I got there, like, it had already been aired, so he brings it to me. And I'll never forget this. He was like, come on, Mike. He's like, you're a naval officer. You're no stranger to leadership. What do you think? And I was like, yeah, and here we go. And I was like, sir, it's no secret. I said, I think right now what we've got is like the well's already been poisoned. And I said, and to Jim's credit, and I said, I'm sure you know this, we already had, how many meetings can you have, right? How many meetings can you, and I mean it this time. No, okay, this is your last chance. And I said, we've had meetings, we've aired everything, we've got it all out on the table. And I said, but I'm not sure it can be fixed. I'm really not. And he's like, well, are you comfortable with him as a leader? And I'm like, no, sir, I'm not. And I said, I won't speak for anybody else. I said, everybody had their chance or will have their chance to talk to you. I'm speaking for me only. And I said, and this is coming from someone who's not on his team, right? I said, so, because again, what happens? Hey, you know what? There's 4 of us on a team. There's a high likelihood that one day your team's going to rely on my team and vice versa, And, at that time, Jim was still with us. He was still the TL. And, and I say this with 100% honesty, he didn't prep us for any of that. He didn't say, no, when you go in, hey, don't forget. None of that. It's not his style. He was like, hey, man, these guys aren't stupid. They see what's what. And the next thing you know, he's moved. He's removed, sent somewhere else or whatever. And I'll never forget Vic, L.A. County Sheriff, but prior to that, he was a Marine. And there is a certain phraseology, there's a bond across the board, all services. There just is, But Navy Marine Corps, naval terms, nautical terms like that. And Vic, I'll never forget, he said to me after it's over, he goes, Rock, we just had a mutiny. That's basically what happened. He's like, we had a mutiny. He's like, we bonded together and we had a mutiny. That's exactly what, like, we had a mutiny. And I'm like, man, now you put a spin on it like that. I'm like, yeah, I guess maybe we did. And he's like, hey, don't get me wrong. He's like, I'm just giving it a name. He's like, the decision was right. But I mean, so, looking at it again, how did he get there? Well, somebody knew somebody, or he presented from, had a security clearance that was, required for the position. I want to say like I think he and Cheese actually worked as instructors for TSA when there was a really big push on for air marshals. So, because John came from a tier 1 background and Dave was a very good shooter. He really was. But again, that's a piece of it. Right. It's one piece of it. It's like, I want guys with me that could help me win a gunfight, but I also want guys that could help me avoid the gunfight so we don't have to win it. But if we do get into it, I'd like those guys, you know what I mean? Like, right. I want that guy that can do both, But that was wild. And,
so now, out of curiosity, so this is, I like hearing all of this, obviously, it's why I'm here. But did you have an option to just select Israel? Like, what was they just sent an email? You got an email?
Right. Well, again, like he knew somebody. So did I. Yep. We all did. In fact, this was a small world. Mark had a colleague who put him in touch with folks at DynCorp. And just so happened that this guy had been connected with Delta in some capacity. I don't believe he was an operator. I think he was like maybe, a part of the support community. I don't remember 100%. But, similarly, like, Mark had his mentor, I had mine. That was the next project that they were gearing up for. And you know what? Really, looking back, that's a simple way, like, that's how it happens. So how do guys slip through the cracks? And you know what? Had Mike loaded his magazine right, had he been a little bit, proficient and, who knows? But I also believe this, there are those moments where you're kind of like, all right, you're drinking from a fire hose now. There's skills that most of us had, whether we were, tier 1 or spec ops or not. There were skills that we had that we brought to the table, whether we acquired them at a school somewhere or just training, or, for me, like years and years of working for a company who, while providing executive protection, spared no expense to put all of us through shooting schools, driving schools. And the more you did it, the more you'd learn. Like, okay, communications, you're going to take care of all the radios and make sure that, there's secure comms with our, comms guy in the embassy. So you're our team liaison for that. So, that to me, that was the fun part of it. It was like work, but it wasn't, because it was enjoyable. But at the end of it, you realize like why you're here, and it's not airsoft. It's not like people will get hurt if you're not on all the time. And one of the things that I will never forget, I would much like now, like I would get up early in the morning and I'd hit the gym first thing. And I remember one night, Jim was like, what time are we looking at here, brother? Yeah, we'll wrap it up here pretty soon. But which sets us up for part 3. Because remember, even though my beautiful bride created a small commercial break, this is still part 2, A and B. I was going to give a thumbs up, but I don't want to. Actually, you know what? When we're done with this today, I'm going to give a double thumbs up, and we'll see the fireworks because it's goofy. But I do remember this, and this would probably be a good place to stop. There was a bar on the seaside right next door to the embassy So when you'd go out the back exit or entrance of Marine Post number 2, the back side of the embassy, there was a secure courtyard. So we'd bring the vehicles up from the garage below, drive up, come around, pull into the courtyard, and that's where we would load out all of our gear and then would roll out from there. Right next door directly was Mike's place. And the story went, as I recall, Mike was an American expatriate who, American living in Israel. Beautiful. I mean, it's a nice bar, and the front was always open and you're right out there's the beaches out there, beautiful and all that. So I remember once Jim's just messing with me and he goes, Rocky, how do you get up so early to go to the gym? And the only thing I could think, I was like, because I'm in bed at 7:30. Like, are you kidding? I'm like, I'm not a night person at that time. So it's a Friday. And he was like, hey, he goes, because, a lot of times what would happen, and then, I remember this, like, it's kind of makes me, it's kind of sad, but Mark and I were like this. We're friends with everybody. We all got along. We all got along really, really well. But he and I were, like, rarely apart. Rarely. And so what would happen was, like, Mike kind of had his own thing, kept to himself a bit. And Jim was like, he'd grab a bite to eat here, sometimes together, sometimes not. But we'd usually come up with like a rally point, So that night he said, hey guys, you know what I want to do tonight? He's like, we're going to Mike's place. We're going to go to Mike's place. We'll have some beers. Like, yeah, sounds great. So I'm home. Mark gets changed. He goes, oh, hey, I'm headed over. I'm going to link up with Jim. I was like, yeah. He goes, come on, man, get changed. Come over. I was like, I will. So, and I'll never forget this, man. I'm watching TV. I'm watching like a DVD probably of I was watching Black Hawk Down. I remember that. I was watching that movie. But it's one of those movies that to me, I liked it so much, you just put it on. And if you fell asleep, it's okay because I saw it before and I'll put it in again and go back to that chapter. So I'm on the couch and I'm watching and my phone rings. And I'm like, hello. And it's Mark. He goes, hey, man, where are you? And I'm like, I'm still at the house. He goes, well, you're coming out, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. I said, look, man, quick shower. I'll be right there. I'm thinking a shower, I'll refreshed. I'm out the door. Dude, I grab the pillow that I'm sitting against. I kind of scooch down on the couch and I'm out. Sleep monster chokes me out. The next thing you know, my phone rings. Man, I startle because I'm like, God, Jesus, I'm up. I'm like, I fell asleep, damn it. So I answer the phone and it's Jim. And he goes, Rocky, where are you? So I'm thinking he's going to bust my balls we're at Mike's. Why aren't you here, right? I go, I'm at the house. He goes, are you alone? I'm like, yeah, I'm alone. He goes, is anybody there? Are the other guys there? I'm like, no. He goes, all right, listen to me. Stay where you are. He goes, keep trying to call Mike and Mark. He's like, Mike's place has been hit. He's like, we got to find everybody. And he's like, but don't you leave. You stay there. And I'm like, gotcha. So it's all over the news. What ended up happening was 2 suicide bombers approached the door casually, right? And they both got some type of messenger bag or backpack. I believe they were both backpacks. But they approached separately. And there was a security man at the door, his SOP is common practice over there. Security man at the door. So you could have your backpack, but I have to check it, right? So the security officer says, let me see your bag. So the first guy opens his bag, and as it's being checked, the second guy gave enough of an interval as if they weren't together. So as the security officer is checking the bag of the first individual, the second guy runs for the door, runs right past guy number 1, runs into the interior and sets himself off, right in the middle of the place, okay? Well, the first guy, I guess at that point is like, fuck this. So he runs down the beach. Well, not the beach, the street. So now, in the midst of all this, Jim gets a hold of Mike. Mark shows up at the house. So, all these calls going which way and which. Mark ends up at the house. Jim gets a hold of Mike. We're all going to reconvene. And I guess in all of the ruckus, Eric is a really solid dude. As I don't there's not no love lost between me and the State Department. There's none. all right, except for a handful of guys, all right. Duke was a good guy, but we didn't really work with him when there was trouble. Like it was in the beginning when things were relatively smooth. Eric took his position when he switched out. Like he was getting ready to redeploy elsewhere, relocate. So Eric took over. So Eric was our go-to, right? When Mike's place was hit, Eric was our guy that would roll with us, our State Department guy that would roll with us. So he talks to Jim, and he was like, all right, he's like, latest word is that one of the bombers was shot by the embassy. And Jim's like, okay. He goes, Jim, please tell me it wasn't one of your guys that did it. Because that could have opened up a whole other can of worms. Like it turned out it was one of the Israeli guards for the embassy. And, I was like, hey, listen, it wasn't one of us legitimately, but Eric was like, it was not funny, but he was like, all right, thank God. All right, like thank God it wasn't, because that would have presented a whole other, issue. But yeah, man, and we lost friends of ours, people that we came to know, wait staff there, friends of there. I mean, again, it was just spoke volumes to the community there and how we were just kind of like made to be part of that, But I mean, to me, I get it. I understand people's, we call it their doctrine, their belief system, their what have you, but never in my wildest dreams did I think of anything like, there's no honor in suicide bombing. There's not. And I get it, martyrdom and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? It's also the act of a coward. You want to be a soldier, you want to be a warrior. There's a way to do that. Running into a civilian establishment, and that's not it. That is not it. But yeah, that was kind of heavy and kind of dark. And meanwhile, we've got an incursion into the box because it's time to train. All right. So where are we? Let's check the time. Oh my goodness, it's a minute. That's a minute and 6. That's an hour and 6 plus a little half hour before my beautiful wife. So all right, guys, that's part 2. All right, so more to follow. We're still in Israel, man.
Yeah,
we're still in Israel. So
expedite this,
no, there's no way to expedite it, man. It's gonna be like one of those sitcoms though, where the part of Frayne will now be played by
exactly.
Burke. But no, I mean, I enjoy having you here with this. It's cool, and you asked for it, so all right, I appreciate you, brother. And all right, everyone, thanks for joining us. And if you have any comments, too bad, because the comments are turned off because frankly, I don't want to hear any militant nonsense, right? So we'll keep it light, and that's all for now. All right, out.